Welcome, everybody, to the Channel Vision magazine webinar featuring Bicom Systems, Telnyx, and we have some Bicom Systems partners in a discussion of the value of SMS and MMS messaging for business communications. I'm your moderator, Bruce Christian, Senior Editor of Channel Vision magazine. Our presenters include Patrice Bramont, Business Success Manager for Bicom Systems. And from Telnyx, we have Steele Schmeld, Director of Sales, and Odrin Reedy, Senior Product Marketing Manager. And with that, let me turn it over to Patrice.
Thank you, Bruce. So before we start, and before we have our partners sharing their experience, I'd like to share a few market insights about SMS and MMS. Especially on North America market today, SMS is still the preferred communication tool for businesses and widely used for sales and promotion, customer support, event and appointment reminders, emergency alerts, and so on. The difference of SMS over other forms of communications we have today is its efficiency. Nearly 60% of text messages are open and reply within 2 minutes in comparison to the 37 associated with the emails. Well, as you know, MMS is not just SMS with multimedia options, of course not. It's much more than that. First, it has much longer character capabilities and can be used for things like product presentation, support issues with screenshots, coupons, discount, and make it more visual and visible for the customers. Ultimately, MMS is really the perfect tool when you need to help to humanize your brand and service with more visual contents, while a simple SMS will only allow us to use text, obviously. Some market data, as I said about SMS and SMS. I mentioned the efficiency, the high level of efficiency of the SMS. Despite this 98% open rate, SMS and MMS are not widely used today by businesses for marketing purposes. And surprisingly enough, 61% of marketers today in North America do not use SMS yet, which means that the potential for growth is absolutely huge. And as you can see in the statistics here, 73% of them expect, 73% of these businesses expect to have their budget on SMS to increase in 2022. So to say the least, it's not a mature market at all. Okay, that's it for the quick market data and insight that I wanted to share with you. Let's listen to our partners now, starting with VoIP Office. Based in Chicago, VoIP Office has been a Bicom Systems partner for over 5 years now, and one of our biggest success. VoIP Office is represented today by Romano, its IT director. We also have SDTEC as a partner, which is also based in the US, but in San Antonio, Texas, represented today by Wes Ulmer, the CEO. And also we have Nova9 Technologies, one of our historical partners since 2013, based in South Africa, with Michael Tumble as the managing director. Okay, let's start with Romana. If you could please introduce VoIP Office and yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here as a panelist. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad to represent VoIP Office. We are a VoIP service provider and providing one-stop solution for our small and medium enterprise customers. So we are using private cloud telephony services with help of Bicom. Since 2014, we have been transformed as a private cloud telephony service provider. And thank you so much being here. Thanks, Patrice.
Thank you, Romana. Wes, can you say a few words about SDTEC and yourself, please?
Sure. We've been around for a number of years, and we've been doing VoIP since about 2008. got introduced to Bicom and migrated all of our clients who were on a different platform before, and we were able to move everyone over to Bicom, and it's just been night and day difference. Very, very few issues, if any, and before we were having intermittent problems from time to time, but we've loved to see how the platform's grown over the years and different iterations and the things they've been able to add, and hope to see continued growth through the next couple of years.
Thank you, Wes, and we'll have more to come in 2020, obviously. Thanks. Malcolm, if you could introduce Nova9 and yourself, please.
Welcome, everybody, and thanks for having us on this webinar. To give you a bit of background, I spent many years fighting the least cost routing space where before the advent of VoIP and the legislation of VoIP, so it's been quite an interesting journey for us. And during that process, joined mobile operators and spent a lot of time dealing with networks and understanding how they moved minutes around on SIM cards. So it was quite nice to see an environment change into the voice over IP space when we advocated and fought legislation within the South African market. And as a result, moved through the network operators, tried to convince people to go to voice over IP. And at that point, I met Phil, and Phil convinced me that Bicom was the right product. I had a look at it, and it ticked all the boxes. And we haven't looked back since then. And we've been driving it across our reseller channel. We're a distributor, one of Bicom's few distributors out there, pushing it through a good reseller channel within the South African market and seeing great success. And the unified stuff really excites me. As I said, it adds a lot of value, and I'm watching it grow and a big advocate of unified communications.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you all, gentlemen. And back to you, Bruce, for the roundtable session, please.
Hi, thank you, Patrice. It's interesting finding out about your partners, but one thing that I'd like them all to address, if they could, is to go back and share some recent successes that you've had in using SMS and MMS. And let's start with Romano.
Like we have been in business since 2004, and lately in 2015, we started getting requirements from clients and asking for SMS solution. And we have a huge competition out there with other service providers, and we started working with Bicom in 2014. Since then, we have a very reliable services, and it's so happy to be part of Bicom as a partner. And we have put the request when we know that people are looking for SMS. And ever since we started, reporting about these, and Bicom have taken, our feedback as a consideration. It was a tough time to, compete with others, and after all these years, Bicom overcome and he added the feature in the unified communication application. So it was having all the functionalities, and SMS was one of the biggest requirement by the customers. And it was a great evolution that they brought into that, Glocom and communicator application, where we could able to unified all the services in one application to provide the service with, a proud moment for everyone when we have the feature launched and introduced to our customer. And our sales team is been very confident with the way that feature has been rolled out by Bicom. And fortunately, we was also using Telnyx in the other side, and they had a direct integration, and it is an instant way to provide service to clients, and all the customers are now very happy using the SMS and MMS with Bicom service as a VoIP office customers.
Okay, that's good to hear. Wes, how about you?
Yeah, we saw a growing need for SMS over the years, and it's interesting to see the way that different clients prefer to communicate, but we found that a large majority of them because, you know, I think like Patrice was mentioning earlier in the slides, that there's a much quicker response typically to SMS than email. So you send a client an email and ask them, hey, I need this information, and you're waiting, you know, day or two, get a response back, but you text them and they reply back in 2 or 3 minutes. So we've definitely seen when we started using texting on our you know, quote unquote landline for the business, we saw a huge, very quick adoption with our clients, and that's the bulk of them actually prefer nowadays to contact us instead of submitting an email ticket or calling us. They prefer to actually just text in and say, hey, I'm having this issue and I'd like to get it resolved, and then we create a ticket based on that text. So it seems to be the preferred method these days.
Yeah, it certainly does. How about you, Malcolm? Have you got anything to add?
We've seen quite a interesting trend. You know, you go back probably 5 years ago, there was a big flurry of SMS, and SMS seemed to be the de facto communication tool. And with the advent of the WhatsApps and the signals and telegraphs and all the multimedia, you started seeing a shift from a communication point of view to other platforms. And in the recent times, we've seen the move back now to SMSs purely because your environment is a environment that's common across all platforms. So a particular person might be on a WhatsApp, or there might be, as we said, an email or whatever it happens to be, but they're not getting the same communication from one single source. So quite rightly, and going to what we're saying, you're getting a quicker response. People are starting to react to it a lot quicker, and from a marketing point of view, it's having a lot more inroads than trying to get across 3 or 4 different communication platforms that someone needs to communicate. So we're starting to see the uptake again, and that's starting to have impact, especially now with the pandemic. And the guys are looking at ways to cut costs and so forth. They're finding that SMS is being more an attractive solution.
Interesting. Steele or Odron, have you got anything to add to this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I would jump off of Malcolm's last point as well about, you know, those omni-channel technologies, things like WhatsApp, Signal, and Telegram. It is very clear that they're gaining a lot of popularity, but to Malcolm's point, the ubiquity of SMS and MMS is really something that we see as a huge value point for so many of our customers. You know, if you're sending from a phone number in a given country to another phone number in that country to a cell phone in that country, that customer can receive your communications without downloading an app, without going through a very strict process. It's being able to instantly reach, you know, people without needing to get them to take any action in order to receive your communications. And that really is why, you know, other forms, other channels such as Apple Business Chat and Google RCS are becoming even more interesting as well, because there's the prospect of having that default always on reachability on the vast majority of handsets. But again, with the richer communications and the greater media support that comes with tools like WhatsApp and Signal.
And what about you, Steele?
I think kind of in line with what everyone else has discussed, like the asynchronous form of communication through SMS is a nice alternative when the real-time communications isn't a preferred method of communication for certain folks, or is just a nice way for a lot of the users, I think, particularly with the shift to remote work, to just have that as a way to communicate not only with customers, but also with colleagues in a lot of cases.
I'm wondering, before we move on, could you also tell us a little bit about Telnyx?
Sure, so good question. So how we work with Bicom is Telnyx is a carrier, mobile operator, and communications API provider. So we plug in, well, we've done a lot of work with Bicom and the product team to make it easy for folks like Romano, Wes, Malcolm, and some organizations to embed SMS. So Bicom offers the SaaS and API SaaS and UI component, and then we offer the backend SMS transport. And what we've done is try to make it as easy as possible for users of SMS to stand up that integration between the wonderful software that Bicom offers and the transport of messaging that Telnyx offers.
Okay, great, thanks. Let's start this next question off with Odron. Mobile network operators, have implemented a set of rules known as the 10-digit long code, or 10 DLC. And these rules govern how businesses use local phone numbers to connect with customers in the US via SMS and MMS. And 10 DLC is quickly becoming a point of interest for businesses. So how are your businesses adapting to this change?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Bruce. And 10 DLC is absolutely a point of interest and a big migration that we're needing to make. I guess before I dive into the meat of the question, setting the stage and explaining 10 DLC in a little bit more detail for those in the audience that might be unfamiliar. Those high open rates, those fantastic reply rates, quick reply times that Patrice and Wes alluded to earlier in the webinar are really thanks in no small part to the trust that consumers have in SMS as a channel, right? If you receive a text to your phone, especially if that text comes from a local area code number that you recognize, you'll expect it to be valuable. You'll expect the content to have some value and some relevance to you, and you're very inclined to open it. The trend that the industry has been seeing, which puts that at threat, is more and more spam and more unwanted texting coming along those local number channels. If you are in the messaging industry and you try to set up, for example, a toll-free number or a 5-digit short code, there's quite a long and onerous approval process that you need to complete, before you can actually get high throughput and send those messages. Historically, that has not been the case with these local 10-digit long code numbers, right? You can just buy a number and start sending. And of course, that is what is really leading to lots of this unwanted spam and kind of unsolicited text messages arriving on the handsets of consumers and really eroding that trust and those high answer rates that the channel really enjoys. So to combat this, mobile network operators in the US are beginning to apply rules, and those rules are kind of collectively known as 10 DLC rules, and those govern how you can send messages using these local 10-digit phone numbers. And effectively, the rules, to boil it down, really say that if you would like to send messages from a business to a person using one of these local phone numbers, you need to first identify who you are and also identify what you are sending, or give people an idea of the content that you will be sending. There's a lot more to it, and we could sit here and talk all day about 10 DLC, but I'll leave it there from the Telnyx perspective and leave it to our partners to kind of discuss some of the real world effects of it.
All right, well, thank you. What about it, Romano? Tell me how you're using it and any success stories you want to share.
Yes, this is a great invention and the implementation that they have done, and it's a kind of regularity requirement nowadays, and kind of people sending a message to someone else and they're not getting somewhere, they are not seeing actual SMS is being originated. So when they look at their local region and area codes, they see the response back immediately, and they see that this is coming from a right person, and the identification was very straightforward, and there was no any gap in between the communication implementing the solution. And the customers likes to send messages to area, preferring their own DIDs to show the actual caller ID for their business. So this is one of the great invention that has been used by clients, and it is giving us so much boost to sell point for our company to offer services. And the clients that they are asking about the service was so happy because they were able to represent their numbers in business level,
All right, let's move along to Wes. How is your business adapting to this change with the 10 DLC?
We've got a handful of clients that are using SMS, so it hasn't really affected them that much. But us personally, we mainly use it just for communication with clients. So we don't typically send out any kind of marketing or mass messages or anything like that. So it's mainly tickets, follow up, communication along those types of interactions with the clients. So we haven't gotten into anything regarding advertisement or sending out mass messages at all. So it hasn't really affected us directly. Sure, if we start implementing that in the future, then that may have an effect on us. But as of right now, not really.
Okay, how about you, Malcolm?
Pretty very much the same lines as Wes. So we're not seeing a massive change in the way we do business in respect to that. What we are finding is that more and more people are adopting it because they're finding that the hit rate to their customers is better. They inform the customers from a marketing point of view, and we've got one particular customer that uses quite an extensive marketing plan to drive SMS into their business to get people into their doors. And they're quite happy to use it. But the rest of the guys, it's more about, well, what number I get, I use. And I think in time, quite rightly as mentioned early on, when the marketing and the spam starts taking over and you've got your legislation, your opt-in and your opt-outs and all the other bits and pieces that go with it, you want a higher hit rate. You don't want people to opt out just because it comes from any old number. So I do believe from a market perspective, it'll start driving it. It'll be sort of be more widely used going forward.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, Malcolm, let's stay with you as long as you're already there. Aside from 10 DLC or other regulatory matters, what are some recent challenges that your business has faced in connecting with customers via SMS or MMS, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Fortunately, again, I'm in a sort of captive environment, so our challenges haven't been extremely difficult in the SMS delivery. But what I can say is that with the 10 DLC and the advent of changes of SMS, the reply options, when you get your number, the 10-digit number or a particular number gets through and an individual replies, at least it's going somewhere. And the network and the gateways are also able to provide statistics on what has been successful, what has been failed. So you start getting a more interactive and valuable response to your SMS campaigns. And that to us has been a big game changer. Whereas beforehand, in the old days, it was a fire and forget, and hopefully your customer got it, and you're not too sure if you can get a response. Now you're at least getting some sort of response, which I think has been the real game changer in regards to the SMS. And the second part of that is the limitations with the 165 characters. Send one in SMS, and the customer now needs to send more than 165 characters. What do? They would send one SMS, and then they would send a second and the third SMS and try and hopefully the customer gets in an order and it doesn't go linked one of one and linked two of one and so forth. And now obviously with this, it gets concatenated correctly, and they get all the SMS in one length of 100 characters, 400 characters, 500 characters, whatever it happens to be. So it has context and has value. And I think that was the challenges in the past, which has now been overcome.
Interesting. What about you, Romano? Do you want to add anything here?
Yes. We like I mentioned earlier, initially when the SMS was released, the competition was high and the people was adapted the service and they're providing in their services. We tried several options even before with some third parties, and they were providing the SMS service from some kind of XMPP integrations and that kind of a stuff. We had to use some open source applications and provide the service to customers because we need to fulfill their requirement. Believe me, ever since we started doing that, every day, we get, complaints from customers saying, I'm not able to reach the destination where I'm trying to send the message. And, it's a kind of difficult for us to, trace out and, resolve the issue. And we have to go to the, vendor and inform them, hey, we are using this and it's not been, getting into the other side. And, it's kind of weird. And then we tried a different model, taking a proprietary application and integrating and trying to, do the service. And we faced a lot of challenges, even like the other service provider was also not consistent delivering the SMS and MMS services. And after Bicom launched this, we have removed that integrations that we have, and we completely turn it off, and we move over here, and we migrated most of the clients, and they were very happy using Telnyx as a background service provider. They never know, but as a front end service, they see our application and they are able to send the messages in very confident way.
Hey, Steele, can we discuss the same topic with you?
Sure. So I think to Romano's point there, our role and thoughts in the messaging world, and to Oren's comments about this new implementation of things like 10DLC, deliverability is really kind of the name of the game, and making sure that the message actually gets to whoever's supposed to receive it, or no one actually gets all these wonderful benefits that come with receiving a text message. And if it's not getting to where it's supposed to be going, having access to information that allows you to either follow up with another text message, make a phone call, reporting, billing, if you're reselling the services or monetizing the services, and then records of all of this as well, similar to how you get with calling. So a lot of the underlying, detail that comes from just sending or receiving a text message, we, again, just want to make that as easy as possible to do, as reliable as possible to do, so that the people using the services really just get to feel the benefits and don't have to stress too much about everything that goes into making a text message happen.
That's great. And Wes, what about your business? Has it faced any problems, and how did you overcome them?
I think the main thing was just, getting, the key points are kind of like the other guys were talking about too, is making sure you have not only a good application on the front end, for example, like Communicator, and then having a good provider on the back end like Telnyx to make sure that that text message is actually getting delivered, because it's, whether you're doing marketing or whether you're communicating with clients for ticketing or any other troubleshooting related, it doesn't make us as partners or as a company trying to provide this service look very good if those messages aren't getting delivered, and it just kind of compounds on top of potential issues they're already having. So you want to make sure you have that reliable ecosystem across the board, and using tried and true products and service providers. So all of that entire system together, kind of like Steele was talking about earlier, with having the SaaS components on Bicom side, and then having that reliable service provider on the Telnet side.
Okay, let's stay with you, Wes, because you've kind of led us right into the next question. What is the biggest benefit that you are seeing from having a unified communications interface where you can make phone calls and send SMS in one place?
I think it puts us on par with a lot of the other bigger players. can't think of some of them off the top of my head, but like the Vonages and the 8x8s and stuff like that. When we go in and do a bid at a larger client, they ask about things like that. They ask about, hey, does your system do this? Does your system do that? And one of the questions 9 times out of 10 is, can we send SMS through your system? Does it support MMS? All those kinds of things. And now that that's all implemented, we can say, yes, it does. And we can provide that level of support and that functionality and know it's going to be delivered reliably and not adding another thing we're going to have to troubleshoot every other day. So that's the simplicity of implementation, and the reliability of it is a big key.
Okay, great. Romano, let's turn to you on that same question.
It was really, it was really a very big pain point for VoIP Office when we was not having SMS integrated with communicator. So we was able to sell the services, like Wes mentioned, the competitors like, like their third party, we don't need to mention their names. They were so aggressive, and, the questions that we get was, it's a kind of disappointment. You can't able to answer it. Eventually you wanted to work with them, but, you kind of a piece that you've been missing out. And it is now, it's given so much boost to the business, and telling them, hey, we got this been added, and we are a unified app, and it's been productive, and you can leverage our features, and you don't need to wait for, like, the way things has been moving on with one unified app with all the requirements. It is quite extreme happy, and it's kind of excellence for every customer that we are getting on.
Okay, and Malcolm, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, it's the SMS integration is been critical to open up additional vertical markets. To give you an example, pharmaceutical markets. Someone phones in for a script, or you deal with a script, and it's a case of, well, what do you want the script? So you take the ambiguity of giving the customer the wrong information. People look at their phones if they're on the way to a destination, or they're going somewhere, and they say, well, what's a quick lookup? Did I get the address right? Have I got the information correct? And by presenting, as Wes alluded to, the correct ticket number and so forth. So from us, we've seen a massive uptake, massive requirement, and the market's definitely opened up to areas where SMS has become the persuasive tool in there, and saying, right, how do we get to communicate you and provide you with the great information? So definitely a plus on that side.
I see. Hey, Odron, the pandemic has changed the way that businesses see communications. And I'm wondering, from your point of view, how did that change into your product lines?
Yeah, it really fed into what Telnyx does in a huge way. I think the world took some time to adjust after February of 2020, but as soon as it did, what we really saw was that SMS became even more important than it had been before the pandemic, right? Time-sensitive communications that will be open soon after they are sent. Kind of to Wes's point earlier, instead of sending an email and waiting several hours for a response, you're more likely to send a text and at least know that it is more likely to have been open more quickly if it's more of a time-sensitive update. For example, if you're sending a notification to your customers about a service change that is happening because of pandemic-related effects. If you're, for example, managing appointments for an in-person service, SMS became so important in serving those use cases. Aside from that, I suppose phone calls also became more important because in uncertain times, people are more likely to pick up the phone and call someone to get the most up-to-the-minute information instead of relying on a website. But really just writ large, real-time, time-sensitive communications became incredibly important in any business trying to serve their customers. And I think the growth in SMS volumes really speak for themselves over the last year or so.
Yeah, they really do. I know I probably text more than I do anything else anymore myself. So it really is true. Hey, I just want to remind all of our attendees that if you have any questions, go to the Q&A icon and just write them down. And so we'll get to your questions when we're finished with our roundtable here. In the meantime, let's go back to Malcolm and ask that same question about the pandemic changing the way that you're doing business.
We've seen a massive uptake. I'm going to use a particular customer that was affected. They basically closed doors for 6 months because they were in an environment where they dealt with people all day and every day. So the hospitality market was really destroyed with the whole pandemic. And in order to stay afloat, they had to get to their customers. Now, in particular, they would run an SMS campaign, say, come in, and they were a particular spa, and we got these treatments and so forth. And now they didn't have those customers to interact with. So what they did was they started running SMS campaigns saying, come get your ointments from us, we'll deliver them. This is it. They sold vouchers. So they changed their business model overnight to reach their customers while we were in the constant lockdown and the flux of lockdown here, and then it gets relaxed and they get customers in, and then they get locked down again. So they've been through a rocky period, like a lot of businesses during the last 2 years, and I think it will continue. But definitely the SMS helped them stay afloat, and I think a lot of businesses in the similar vein. So it was a great change for them in the way to keep alive.
Okay, Romano, do you have anything to add?
Yes. So before pandemic, like we kind of as service provider sell free phones with our service, and it's kind of requirement where we serve clients from India and combined with US. After pandemic started, like we do have these applications, services, everything available, even though clients was working from offices and they were dependent on IP phones, physical devices. Now after pandemic started, like there was so much lockdowns everywhere, and people are not moving, and they wanted to continue their business. They don't want to stop. So they approached Wipe Office, and we have about 800 customers. Our team worked with them day and night to provide the application to have their service resume the way they were doing before and after pandemic, on ongoing pandemic, they were able to handle. And with that lineup, everyone was using separate applications. After that, they wanted to use SMS, MMS, and everything in one application. So fortunately, we got into all versions. Bicom released on time, and we were able to support the customers during the pandemic. After pandemic, it's a kind of relief for the physical phone. They don't need to depend on, so they can travel, they can be everywhere, they can work from home like I'm doing right now. So it's a kind of huge revolution that has been brought up this pandemic.
Steele, are you seeing an increased uptake of SMS as businesses seek to keep customers informed?
Absolutely. So I think one of the biggest takeaways that I've had, I guess, like with more of like a sales lens exposed to all the different types of use cases, is the growing ways that SMS is getting adopted. So we talked a little bit about so far about hospitality, healthcare, even engaging with employees, engaging directly with customers for troubleshooting, support. SMS can get used to invite people to meetings. You can include a link to a bridge for join a call, reminders, prescription notifications. So like I think the types of use cases, delivery notifications has been a huge one as well. As like more and more people are ordering things online themselves, are going to stores. So I think that's been one of the biggest takeaways for us. And as an organization that doesn't, like, our focus isn't the UI component. So when someone says, hey, Telnyx, like, we want to use messaging, you know, we have like a hospital system that relies on us as an MSP. We're like, great, but we don't have this UI component that you need. We do have Bicom, and they've been a wonderful partner of ours. They've written into our tech stack so that it's very simple for someone to port a phone number, buy a phone number, provision that in the Bicom environment, and they're off the races for any of these use cases to support the clients. So I think that's kind of the lens I've seen SMS grow, I guess, throughout the pandemic and the changes over the last couple of years.
I see. Okay. And Malcolm, let's turn to you on that question. Are you seeing an uptake in SMS as businesses seek to keep your customers informed?
Most definitely. I think we pretty much covered a lot of the information. Just to add to what Steele was saying, is that we're finding a lot of people are putting URLs in SMSs, saying go into our website, here's some advertising, you know, so they can get more out of it. Here's a download our brochure, click on this URL. The fast food industry, massive now on the SMS drive, where, you know, you would order, for example, pizza, and it'll say to you, we've received your, we've received your pizza. They don't have to worry about, are you on WhatsApp or whatever mechanism on. They know the SMS will get delivered to you. So they're starting to, the drive to keep the consumer happy through multiple SMSs is becoming more and more prevalent. To give you another example, one of our customers is in the teaching fraternity, and when they write an exam and when the next exam is coming up and the results and, you know, where they've passed and what do they need to do, all that information, I've seen a massive uptake to try and communicate to those particular individuals. And in South Africa, we've got pretty much, I wouldn't say a unique environment if you want to consider third world versus first world. A lot of the customers don't have access to smartphones, or they don't have access to data because their finances are limited. But an SMS is a delivery mechanism. You don't need to have funds in your phone in order to receive SMSs. So you get your one directional instead of bi-directional, and you're still communicating. And a lot of people are saying, well, that's how we can communicate to our customers. So they've increased that marketing and that drive to get to customers. So a massive uptake in that environment.
Interesting. Hey, let's move on. Romano, can you share with us your plans and ambitions for connecting with your customers and teams by SMS in the future?
Yes, like, we have implemented, way to handle and notify customers using our billing and support, tickets via text. And it has been not provided to them in a way that we support right now. So we wanted to cover every possibility way where our customers can able to reach us through all communication tools. In future, like we implemented a billing integration directly with Vicom. So that's one of the, great advantage that we have created with other partner. So they have provided a way for us to integrate these things, to send out the messages to notify for the billing and the tickets. It's a kind of, great to have SMS in right direction. And it is one of the fortunate thing that we have.
Okay, great. Hey, Oldron, I want to go back to you. Earlier, someone mentioned WhatsApp and some of those applications, the disruptive technologies, and they've kind of penetrated the market, and as a result have eroded the SMS MMS market value. So why do we still see SMS MMS as a communication tool?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the point that Malcolm raised earlier as well, which is ubiquity, right? It's knowing that everybody in your audience is going to be able to receive your SMS communications without downloading an app or without signing up for a new service. It really has a whole lot of power, especially when you talk about some of the more time-sensitive, mission-critical use cases that we referred to just a couple of minutes ago. Things like managing appointments for the hospitality industry, things like managing appointments for the healthcare industry, things like notifying your customers of critical service changes. You don't want half of your customers to not receive that notification because they haven't downloaded WhatsApp, right? SMS becomes extremely powerful in those cases. And that's not to say that channels like WhatsApp and next generation, omni-channel communications are not important. To give a personal anecdote, I'm an Irish person living in America. Every bit of my communication with everybody from back home happens over WhatsApp. It's really hard to understate just how popular it is outside the US. And I think that's where we see a lot of the growth. But really for those mission critical, time sensitive applications, SMS will take a lot to be dethroned as the king there.
And Malcolm, since Odron mentioned you in his answer, do you want to comment on that?
Nothing really much more to add, but it's exactly that. I mean, you've got the fight with Geo, with Google, and you're going to have these constant next gen environments, kicking up and throwing. But at the end of the day, the last thing you want as an administrator is to say, well, I've got to manage 5-6 platforms, and hopefully 80 or 90% of my customer base is on those 5 or 6 platforms. And then from a management tool, I've got to consolidate it all, put it together. Did my customer get it? Did they not? Did they respond? Whereas quite rightly, the SMS is one mechanism. I'm getting all the reports. I'm getting the feedbacks that I need. And it makes a lot more sense.
Hey, Patrice, I want to bring you back in here. SMS providers provide short codes for competition, revenue sharing. So has Bicom developed an environment to deliver bulk SMS, or like 1 million plus maybe, to be predetermined set of numbers? And do they have the ability to receive the replies? Or must this be driven as a bespoke project through our SMS provider?
Well, I wasn't too sure actually about this, Bruce. To be honest, I know we've been developing and integrating both SMS and MMS with different partners, and obviously Telnyx is our biggest partner on this. Now we're going to be expanding this integration in the next new releases of our unified communication platform to be announced in 2022. Now, specifically on your question, I'm not too sure how to answer this one. I can tell, I don't know if maybe Steele or Odron, you can provide some response here.
So I guess from the Telnyx perspective, short codes for sending bulk SMS are a very popular use case that we see, right? And it's something that, with our direct customers, we absolutely support. I think with the tightening regulatory environment that we see across all SMS channels, 10DLC, short codes, and also toll-free numbers, it is becoming more and more difficult. And each of those channels really has advantages and disadvantages. But yeah, bulk send of SMS via a short code is definitely a popular use case that we see and that we support. And maybe Steele, you can speak to, some of the plans that we have to build out that support in future, maybe alongside Bicom as well.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, when it comes to SMS, it's a really short code, toll-free, and long code, which is now kind of abbreviated to 10DLC. There was this concept of shared short codes. Without getting too into the minutia, that's kind of transitioning away. It's like some of what Oren talked about earlier with abuse of the business to person or application to person messaging. So businesses will have to have dedicated short codes or leverage toll-free or 10DLC, depending on the type and volume, I guess, of messaging that they're trying to send out. So, I mean, we've continued to put in a lot of work to make sure that we have all of these channels available, and work closely with Bicom product marketing, et cetera, to make sure that if there's a need from the market, that we can push that into an environment that makes it easy for our mutual customers to take advantage of.
Okay, great. We've got just a couple minutes left. Before we go, though, we do have an attendee question that I want to get to. But before we get to that, I'm wondering, Patrice and Steele and Odron, would you like to remind attendees how they can reach you?
Absolutely, yeah. They can reach out to us by sending us an email to business-success@bicomsystems.com, and we would be happy to guide them through the integration to our PBXware with Telnyx SMS.
Sales@telnyx.com for any inquiries, and our team will field those and take appropriate action to make sure that we're supporting them and getting their environments set up with Bicom.
Okay, great. I do have one question, and I'll let whoever wants to answer it. Maybe Patrice, you could start. Are there any concerns about worker productivity when using SMS and MMS more actively?
I don't see how that would be a concern. I mean, how productivity would be a concern. Actually, I think it would be an increase of productivity instead of using multiple platforms and multiple ways to reach out to your customers, suppliers, whoever business contacts you have. Using SMS and MMS will simplify this. That's what I would say. I'm not sure if this refers to some kind of internal use or personal use of SMS or MMS, but either way, having one simplified platform and way to communicate with your business partners, I think would increase in productivity of you as an individual and you as part of your business.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think agreed. I see, I think, more upside in terms of productivity than downside. And as part of it, I think a use case that really hasn't been fleshed out too much, but I think relates to productivity is multi-factor authentication, and SMS being a channel that's popular for authentication for access into whether it's systems or certain applications and things of that nature. So in the realm of productivity, we've seen a huge uptick in embedding SMS and voice actually for two-factor authentication.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up today's webinar. I want to thank Bicom Systems' Patrice Bromont, Business Success Manager, and to Telnyx's Steele Chanel, and Director of Sales, who's Director of Sales, and Odron Reedy, the Senior Product Marketing Manager. I also want to thank Bicom System partners Romano Ulsa, Wes Ulmer, and Malcolm Turnbull for their participation. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Now, from all of us at Channel Vision Magazine, from Bicom Systems and Telnyx, thank you for attending. Have a safe and prosperous day.